Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is a show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in the tri-state area, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. And sometimes we go outside that region to get somebody that we think is really important for you to hear about. We're glad to have you here. I'm Carter Seaton, and today our guest is Sheila Redling, who writes under the pen name of S.G. Redling. She is the author of more than a half dozen novels, including the best-selling thrillers Flowertown and The Widow File. She's a former radio host in the morning, way early in the morning, an avid traveler. She's also a language geek, a wine enthusiast, a so-so gardener, and a harborer of stray and feral cats. She graduated from Georgetown University and currently lives here in Huntington, and her home state is West Virginia, of course. She also has a wild array of wildlife that live near her. So she's my good friend as well, the creator of a monthly event called The Fiction Factory and a sought-after workshop leader. Her latest book is Trigger, and it's the third in the Danny Britton thriller series. Glad to have you, Sheila. So you said it early in the interview that changing from Flowertown to Damocles made it hard for them to kind of find a niche for you, a platform for you. Do they feel more solid about you now, or do they just let you
They're just like, I don't
all
know.
over the place?
And you know, the problem with publishing too is you can be with one publisher but have 483 editors. I think one book I had, and when I say editor, I mean the person who acquires it from the publisher. I have one development editor who I love dearly, David Downing. But you have different people who acquire your book and have comment on it for publishing. And I had so many publishers or editors that there was a lot of inconsistency. But I'm not someone who's ever going to write a branded series.
Right.
Like
You're not like a John Grisham who's going to, they're
Right.
always going to, you're going to know what you're getting.
Right. So they do try to brand me as mind-bending mayhem, which I think all of my
Like
books
that.
kind of
Yeah.
fall into
Yeah,
that category.
works. Yeah.
Let's go with that, shall we?
Why
Sure.
not?
All right.
That works just fine. Do you have a favorite of your books, or is it always just the one you just finished?
You know, they're all favorites for different reasons. Like there are some books, like Baggage is one of my emotional favorites. Like that, I love that book on a really, really deep level. I love Flowertown because it was just insane and it got me to the show. And then I love Damocles because I fought so hard for it. And yeah, I love them all. And it's funny because I would have said At Risk was my least favorite because I had to turn it in and finish it at a very bad time. And I never really gave it, it was kind of my neglected child. And I realized it's actually a really good book. Like now I'm like, I should have been nicer to that book. I was kind of mean to it. It was like a child I like threw out or something. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, you've written several pieces. You leave a different part of yourself inside every book.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
You go to a lot of conferences as well, or at least one in particular. It's mystery writers, one for mystery writers.
I go to BoucherCon, right? It's it's as much for fans as it is for writers.
Oh, is it?
And a lot of readers are there. It moves from city to city every year, so it's a good excuse, to go to Vancouver or go to Long Beach. What's nice, and I also sometimes go to Left Coast Crime. I don't go to that as often, but that's always obviously it has to be west of the Rockies. What's nice about them, I mean, the cons themselves, like doing the panels and the workshops that you do, this doesn't surprise you if I tell you this, having been to the West Virginia Writers Conference with me, I don't always go to the workshops. I like to go to meet the people. And I really recommend this for writers who are just trying to get their feet under them in a genre, to find the conference, because you meet other writers who are doing what you do. And some of them are ahead of you in their career, and some of them are behind you in their career. But it's the one place you will be where you will not be the weirdest person in the room. And you realize that everybody else is as neurotic as you, and everybody else is as worried as you, and everyone else has the same ambitions. And it's just, I've made really, really close friends that I see every year at these conferences.
Do some of them become your beta readers?
Sometimes, you know what's funny about that? Especially with crime writers, we generally don't read a lot of each other's stuff because there's so many books in the world. You know, you
True.
can't, you just can't read everything, and there's a certain freedom. I'm friends with Helen Smith and Johnny Shaw and Mike McCrary. I read Mike's stuff, but we don't read a lot of each other's stuff, so we're sort of off the hook when we're together.
Yeah, that makes more sense, right.
There's none of this, did you like it? Because, I mean, let's face it, we're all so neurotic, as, you know, you just can't help it. It's like, did you like it? Do you love me?
Right,
Should I keep doing it?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, now Helen, like, they have come across when I had a problem with baggage, Helen jumped in and read it, and she read Trigger. You know, and I've read her stuff when she's getting ready to pitch it to her agent. When we need them, you do. But generally, we don't even talk about writing that much. It's like a nice place to not have it sitting in the room with you like a big
Right.
angry bird.
But it is like-minded people who just feel each other's pain, so to speak.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
successes.
And
either
right,
way.
we celebrate each other's successes. It's really nice.
Right. I saw that Scott Turow is going to be one of the featured panelists or guests this time.
I'm not going this year.
Yeah.
I'm actually taking a year off of traveling. I'm doing a little busy, for one thing. Doing the shows and new workshops. We started a new intensive genre writers weekend. We did the first one in the fall, and we're doing another one in March. We're hoping to do another one next fall. Mike Nost and I, and it's a chance. There's like 20 writers or so, and they have to submit work and critique each other's work. And it's a lot of hands-on workshopping, and that's taking up a lot of time. I like it. It's really fun, but I think I'm going to skip the conference circuit this year and get back to it next year.
When you talk about genre writing, maybe some people don't quite know what that means. Can you kind of
Sure.
walk them through what what it means to say genre writers workshop?
It's an arbitrary term. It's the people. Some people like to split writing into literary or genre. And if you want to enrage a genre writer, tell them that it transcends their genre, and then just watch their head blow off. The idea is that if you're not just writing about a wholly, just the pure human experience. I don't know. Genres there's crime and mystery, horror, sci-fi, western, romance, erotica. It's anything that has its own section at the bookstore. And then there's this idea that literary is somehow more personal, it's more internal. I'm not exactly sure, because it is a blurry line when you actually look at
Yes.
it. People say Cormac McCarthy is a literary writer.
But
He
he's
writes westerns.
westerns,
They are
right.
westerns, any way
Right.
you slice it. And it's annoying. Someone like Jodi Picoult is considered a genre writer, but if her stuff isn't literary, I really don't understand it. The reason we did the intensive genre writers is that when you do write in a particular genre, there are there are standards for each genre, and you break them at your peril.
I see.
And what it basically comes down to is what is held in most value. Like in romance, love has the highest value. In crime, justice has the highest value. In westerns, the individuality has the highest value. You know, so you have to really understand what is most valued and keep that in mind. And if you break that rule or you devalue what is held at its highest value, you will feel the wrath of the readers of that genre, because you pick up a crime novel because you have certain expectations of the belief of justice. So that's one of the things we do in this workshop, is we help people hone in and clarify what their genre is. And a lot of genres are not taken as seriously. I mean, romance writers take an awful lot of crap. Horror writers take a lot of crap. Even though, romance pretty much bankrolls publishing, and they are some of the hardest working writers in the industry because their readers are voracious.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's what we're doing with the weekend, helping people focus on their genre. And I think if you write in a very narrow genre, it helps you to see how other genres handle plot issues and character development and setting. It just broadens because it's easy to get into a rut and just kind of stay here and write. So it's nice to look up sometimes.
Do you think it's helpful to have tried or to have written well in a genre to then broaden to what the blurry line is that becomes literary or historical fiction?
Well, I mean, but historical fiction is a genre as
Yeah,
well.
that's true.
You know,
It
I mean,
is.
magical realism is a genre, but that's often attached to literary. And the idea is like, what is the level of your writing? Which is kind of an obnoxious thing to say, I think. Um, I think you should just try to write the best book you can. You should try to tell the biggest truth you can, tell the most entertaining story you can, and let other people decide where it falls. You know, you have to know how to define your book to pitch it, but just write your best book. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Don't try to be important. There's
Okay.
nothing more tedious than someone trying to be important when they write. That's my number one
Right.
piece.
Can you give us just, for the viewers out there who might want to jump into Danny Britton,
Okay.
can you give us just a little bit of the plot line of what's going on in Trigger? Because that's the newest one.
Okay. If you're going to start the series, start with the Widow File.
Okay.
Where you meet her. Danny Britton is an analyst, kind of squirrely, oaky, who's come to the big city and she just wants to keep her head down. Things go horribly wrong. Everyone is killed where she works. And it turns out she has got a piece of evidence on her, and they send a hitman to pursue her through the streets of D.C. She lives. She rebuilds her life in Florida.
In Redemption Key.
In Redemption Key. This is the second book. All sorts of problems ensue there. Trouble is following her, as well as the killer. They sent to kill her in the first book, Tom Booker. He finds her in Redemption Key. Turns out to be a strange ally in a very violent way. She's trying very hard to keep her life together. And Trigger begins immediately after Redemption Key. She doesn't know if she's going to be able to stay in Florida. She doesn't know if she's safe now that Tom Booker can find her and the federal government can find her and anyone can put their hands on her anytime. She really does not know what to do. And her pattern up to this point has always been to take off, hide, run away. But she has made a real friendship with Choo Choo and she doesn't want to leave him. They have gone through something traumatic. So
He worked also in the same place where she did.
right, he went through the
in the
same. He
first
was
book.
with her the whole night
Right.
through Redemption Key, or through the Widow File. But then he is called back to his family. So it's a junction for them. Is he going to go back to the posh, pampered life of New York society that he was in before he went on this insane adventure with her, or has his world been inexorably altered as well? And again, Tom Booker. So the story is Danny Britton trying to. She doesn't know who she can trust at this point with Choo Choo or Tom Booker or Kara Hedrick. She can't trust Kara Hedrick. We know that in the very beginning. I haven't spoiled anything for that. She's the villain.
And then, and so now you've introduced somebody new who may or may not be tied to the other problems from the first
Exactly.
book. So,
Right. So this has
fascinating.
been an arc. This is the 3-book arc. Okay,
Right.
so it would behoove you to read all 3 of them.
yes.
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 And I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I think that makes a whole lot of sense because you do get a real full understanding of Danny by knowing what she's been through and how she, got to Redemption Key and why she's there and so forth and so on.
Why she and Tom Booker relate the way they do, because they really are 2 sides of a very strange coin. They are, she didn't have much to rely on. She had to be very self-sufficient as a kid, and she has a unique set of skills like he does. I mean, not the same skills as he, but
Yeah,
they are oddly compatible.
yeah. You said somewhere in this conversation, you said something about you usually know the beginning and the end, and getting to the middle has gotten maybe not easier, but you do it
More efficiently.
More
Right.
efficiently. Do you think since 2012 has it gotten easier to write? Is it the same struggle every time, or
That's a good
has
question.
anything changed in your?
Every book is different. I don't write any book the same way. Every time you finish a book, you think, oh, yes, that's
Now
how you
I
do
know
it.
how to do it,
And then you
right.
start the next one and you don't even remember how to type. Every book, every story comes into this world on its own schedule, in its own time. I don't know, maybe people who do write more formulaic, maybe they have a system that works. I do not. I have to just come up with the premise or the character and let them just sort of stew together until they start to form. And then I ask a lot of questions until I can see generally what can go wrong. I mean, what's the mayhem that can happen?
Those are the things that you put in your notebook.
Yes, yes. And it's funny the things that spark a story. Well, for example, Baggage, about a woman who something terrible always happens to her on February 17th. That actually started when I started working on it. I was writing a story about a woman who develops an obsessive compulsive need to roll dice before she makes any decision. It was a strange, I thought that's a funny thing to do. Like, what if somebody couldn't make a decision unless they like flipped a card or rolled the dice? And then as I thought I knew where that was going, and then I thought, well, why would you have that obsession? Like, how would you develop that? And I started getting to know her better, and I realized that's someone with a secret. And then there's someone who had something they were trying to keep tamped down from themselves in their past. It's like, well, what could that be? And then I realized the secret was the story, and I didn't need the obsessive compulsion. That factor is coming into another book. I mean, that's stash back there. Someone's going to need that.
What do you do with those things that you throw away or that you set aside?
Yes, I set them aside. I have my own crazy head notebooks that I use, but I also have my yellow notebook where I have any random story idea, good way to kill somebody, weird complication, some strange skill, and I just write them in there.
I hope nobody finds that.
I know, that would be very bad. Oh, I have a whole list of things people to destroy so something happened to me. And just strange things that I could use. I have a very good memory, and so a lot of those things just stay back there, and they kind of go into my compost heap, if you will. So when you throw a new seed in, there's a lot of good fertile soil for it to grow in. Which is something I recommend to writers as well, is, pay attention, collect weird stories, think about weird things in your everyday life, so that when it's time that to write, that muscle is working in your brain. Always be thinking about something weird that's happening around you. Don't ever just take anything at face value. And the more you do that, because I think a lot of times young writers think that the more they do that, they're going to run out of ideas. And ideas are the easy part. Ideas rain down. The more ideas you think of, the more ideas will come to you. So don't ever be afraid to just keep burning through ideas.
Do you write every day?
No. I know you're supposed to. When a book is starting, a couple times a week, maybe 500 words at a time. I don't push it when a book is just beginning. I show up for it. I think about it every day. I make some notes on it. I just kind of let it tell me how it wants to come out, find its rhythm. And then once a book is on its feet and it's moving, then I do write every day just because I want to, because the book is ready to go. And then when you get to the end of the book, I just strap myself into the chair and try to just outlast it. The Trigger, I wrote 7,000 words on Christmas Day because it was ready to be done. And it's like, I'm here for you, and it just kind of came pouring out.
Do you write better against the deadline?
I used to, but not anymore. I don't need the pressure. I have a lot of things that I like to do. I learned quickly that that's not a healthy way to go. Like that was kind of my lesson for the past few years, was to put some balance in, to do things, make art, do shows, do things that are not writing, because it's really easy. People always say, well, I wish I could quit my job and stay home and I'd write all day long.
No,
you won't.
wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't. And you get weird. It's you got to keep a foot out there in the world.
Right. Let's see. I have one other question. So, are you reading something right now, or is it?
I'm reading Todd Robinson's new book. I'm blanking on the names of his other books. I'm sorry. I absolutely blanked on it because this one is so different from the other ones. And I was reading Mike McCrary's latest book with two friends I've met through conferences, and I put Mike's down because Todd needs his, he needs a blurb for his. So, and I've got a big stack of books to be read. I had big plans at the beginning of the year. I'm going to read this many books, like a book a week, and life was like, that's adorable. Right. No, you're not. Instead, you're going to tap dance.
That's fantastic. I think it's wonderful that while we don't I don't ever see myself in your character's shoes.
Not yet.
Not yet, but they do feel like people you could meet, that you could run into.
Thank you.
You know, or that you wouldn't want to meet, one or the other, you know. But
Yeah.
they would be people, they are fully realized. There's no question about that.
Thank you.
And you say you don't do a big dossier about them, but you must, I think part of writing, you said you don't write every day, but you do in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, writing is also staring out the window for an hour.
Oh, yes.
Watching the chipmunks while your mind is going
Yep,
a
you
million
have
miles
to
an
let
hour.
that fallow time come.
And so you know those people
Mm-hmm.
long before you ever pick up your laptop.
You have to. I said sometimes creating characters is like being an evil spirit soaring over the world looking for the next victim to possess. Because, you know, you have to pick someone who seems like a perfectly lovely person and get into their head and tear their world to pieces. Because that's what fiction is. You ruin everything and let them show you who they are as they rebuild it. I think a lot of the skill I learned in radio, because you have to really listen to people in radio. Radio is much more listening than speaking. And you have to be able to make very quick decisions about people, how to get them to open up, get them to relax, so that they're
Or get them
entertaining
to
on the
stop
show.
talking.
Exactly. Or not say the thing, you know, that's going to come out of their mouth. And so meeting people, because a lot of times when we meet people, we put ourselves on them. We worry about how they react to us, and are we doing okay? And you've known me not long enough to know that I don't worry about that too much. I like to I do like to see what people are about, and people tend to tell me strange things. Be very careful, by the way, what you tell a writer, because it will be in a book.
Well, you know, I think the same thing is true about interviewing people. You interviewed a lot of people on the radio, and whether it's on the radio or whether it's background information that you're going to use in a book or whether it's for a magazine article, you may have specific questions that you know you need to find the answer to. But once they start talking, if you have listened, it does trigger a question that you had no idea you were going to ask.
You have to listen, because people tell you who they are in very strange ways. But people will very rarely express in words, this is who I am and these are the things I believe in. You make a lot of decisions on how they act, how they sit, what they wear, what they don't say, what makes them blush, what makes them laugh, what makes them go. And if you're paying attention, if you're trying to get to know somebody, and like you're creating a character, you have to kind of feel around for those things. The reason I don't do a big deep dive into my characters all the time, sometimes at a certain point in a book I usually will, but in the beginning, I like to let them surprise me. I like to meet them the way I would meet anybody, talk to them, see how they act to the waiter, or how they react in a traffic jam, or how they react when someone comes in and kills everyone they work with. Let's see what they're made of.
I think that would be very difficult. I really am more the opposite, I guess, because I need to know, in my mind, that person well enough to know how they would react when everybody that's in their world
Right.
is killed. You know, would they, you know, are they solid enough that they would be able to survive it, or would they go completely off the rails themselves? Or, you know, I need to know that person well enough to know that.
Well, I think for me, the books I write are always going to be mayhem. So I already have an understanding that they have to be able to keep it together in some
Okay.
form or another.
All right.
Because they're going to be the hero of the story. So they may not hold it together well, but this is nobody who's going to crumple. But
Yeah.
as you start to put pressure on them, you have to think about what's the absolute worst thing that can happen to them. Because you have to do that to them. And it's tough, you know, sometimes it's exhausting to have this character you really like and know, like, you just want to apologize in the beginning of the book. Like, this is just going to be awful for you. I'm sorry. But you're going to be great at it. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I do invest in them, give them some certain elements of strength or resilience or snark or avoidance that I know are weapons that they can use. because you know I know how the story's going to go generally. I mean, they don't, but I do. I guess a lot of it's just in my head. It's hard. It's weird. It's magic. It really is magic.
Yeah, it is magic, yeah.
Yeah.
Just for a brief minute, let's talk a little bit about ourselves and the reaches. Those are so different from your other books.
I know.
Where did that come from? I guess is
Those
the
are
bottom line.
those are the oldest stories in my head. I mean, that's ourselves. The series is these are people who are the truth behind the vampire myth. So it's, I mean, completely like everything you've known about my other books and throw it out the window. They're not horror. It's not sci-fi. It's not a curse. It's not paranormal romance. It's really an alternate reality kind of story. They are the people who have manipulated the vampire myth to make us think that vampires don't like garlic or they can turn into bats or, you know, whatever. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's like Damocles. The idea, it was just a thought exercise. Like, I loved vampires as a kid. I was obsessed, you know, grown up in the 70s, right? Loved it. And then Lost Boys in the 80s. It was totally my first love. But I always hated the idea that it was a curse and that they wanted to become human again. Because I got to tell you, if I had a biological imperative and the innate right to tear someone's head off, I'd use it. I would not struggle with it. And I just thought, you know, you have all these cool powers. Why do you want to be human again?
Because
So
they don't have all those cool powers.
right. So I wanted to think, well, what if it was what if that was a lie we have been told? Who would they be if they had created that lie to like, oh, look over here, there's a monster. Who would they really be?
And why would they do that?
Right. I mean, how would they live? What would it be like to have to be invisible in the middle of a culture that you were preying upon? They're not like mass murderers, but they do feed on humans. They don't always kill them. They have their own culture, their own religion, their own language. They live dual lives all the time. And once you start playing with that, then it was just fantastic. There's a third one in that series that's done, but I realize there's a book that comes between it and the Reaches, so I'm not going to put the third one out until I write the middle one. I know. I love it. I love that. That's a really fun place for me to play because it's really violent and weird and a lot of mythology and language, and it's what I don't get to do in crime books. You know, you really can't do that.
Yeah. How does your head jump from?
Really?
I mean, seriously. I mean, you've got to be. It seems to me you have to compartmentalize to some extent because you've got this character like Danny, for instance, and there's a certain, like you said, there are certain expectations,
Right.
certain rules for that. You know, and you've got this totally different, weird, alternate reality. How do you decide where your head is at any given time?
Well, this is actually some advice I give in writing workshops when you're getting ready to start a book that I don't think is taken into account enough for young writers. What headspace do you want to occupy for the next 6 months or 3 months or 2 years, however long it takes you to write a book? Excuse me. I don't know how people write similar books back to back to back. I can't read similar books. Like I can't read all of the books in a series in one setting. I need to change gears sharply. So when I was writing The Widow File, I didn't have a lot of time. I was under a lot of pressure. It was a very exciting time. So I knew my headspace, whether I liked it or not, was going to be short, like staccato, tense. So that was the book I wrote. Baggage, I was in sort of a melancholy place. So that was the headspace I wanted to be in. I don't understand how people don't change that gear.
I see.
Because I have to. I get really tired of myself and my headspace and the noise. And like when I'm done with the book, I am done with it. I don't want to think about it anymore. I want to completely turn the ship around and go somewhere else.
So you've probably not written a series sequentially,
No.
back to back.
I always have to write something between it.
Yeah.
I just can't. I just need to come up for air because it's exhausting. I mean, Flowertown, as much fun as that
Oh,
book was,
wow.
that was an exhausting
I'm sure
headspace
it
to be
was.
in.
Yeah.
She was, She was a lot.
She was a lot to handle and a lot to read.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was exhausting.
Yeah. I think we're about out of time here, and I wanted to thank you so much for being with us. This has been just marvelous. I've loved
always so
talking about
fun
every
talking
one
to
of
you.
them, and I've loved every book I've read. I've read most of them, probably not every single one, but
Yeah,
most of them.
that's all right. That's all right. I mean,
I
clearly
did
it's
lo- I
not
did-
for everyone.
Yeah, I did
you know.
love Trigger, I have to
Thank
tell you
you.
that.
That was a lot of
So, thank
fun.
you so much. That's it for today on Chapters on Armstrong Television, and we really appreciate Sheila coming back to visit with us. Remember, we thank the Inner Geek for all of their support and remind you that Sheila's books, as well as those of many of the other people we've interviewed here on Chapters, are for sale at the Inner Geek. And we'll take it from there today and hope you'll be back another day. Thank you so much.
Connect with Chapters via email. Write to lp4@zoom.email. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, and follow. All chapter episodes are available on YouTube. Visit Armstrong's YouTube channel. Follow Armstrong. And look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.